Okay, thank you very much for coming back. I know it's been tempting to stay outside. I'll hurry. Yeah, as said, my name is Andreas Schlaegel. I've come here from Berlin. I've been trained as an artist, and I have come to work mainly as a writer, writing for art magazines and essays for catalogs. Now, when Bassam sent me the invitation to participate here in this symposium, the first thing that came to my mind was, of course, was a subject that I've been interested in for a long time, which is basically the idea of a historical monument. Because if you ask if the times are changing, you know, like, the question is in relation to what? And this is exactly where you'll have to resort to memory, subjective memory, collective memories, and the way they are formulated to develop an idea of what kind of change you are witnessing and what kind of change you are evidently a part of. Of course, like before I come to a historical situation, I mean, we've heard so many, we've heard very universal ideas about the state of the world today. And I wanted to go into a very, very specific place that is removed from here, because I was hoping that this way we could look at it in a form of a model scenario and find a sense of detachment from it, and like to try to understand it better and yeah, to look at it as some kind of model. But before I go there, I felt that I had to address something that's happening that was happening in Berlin recently, which is partly fueled by the things we've heard today, especially the question of the freedom of speech that was raised here, because and this is very closely linked to this idea of the monument, how to remember things, and whose power influences the speech that is made. So this has to do with a work by a Polish artist called Andreas Schlaegel, who is also the director of the current Berlin Biennial. And last fall there was a big exhibition in Berlin called Tür an Tür Polen, Deutschland, 1000 Jahre Kunst und Geschichte, which is door to door, Poland and Germany, 1000 years of history. And in this, a very big representational show of Polish art. And the exhibition, of course, was focused also on the relations of Poland and Germany, but in a strange way, like the everyday life was not present in the show, and this kind of backfired when it suddenly emerged that the work by Schlaegel had gone missing. He presented a video called Berek, which means game of tag, like the children's play where you run around and you catch each other. This game of tag in the video is 4.5 minutes long. You see a group of naked people, young people, there's an old lady, they're all naked and they seem to be in some kind of basement, and only later you understand that they're playing this game of tag in the gas chamber of a concentration camp. An official of the Jewish community in Berlin apparently wrote a letter of complaint and saying that his feelings were hurt by the piece, and that turned out to that facilitated that the work was taken out of the exhibition. And nobody was informed. Actually, it emerged only later when a journalist was looking for this piece in the show and couldn't find it, and instead he just found an empty grey wall. So, of course, there was a big sense of embarrassment. Neither the artist nor the curator were informed. The press was not informed. It was a classic act of censorship. So why did the censorship happen? I mean, because in Germany we like to believe we have quite a reasonable amount of freedom of expression. So a press statement was issued afterwards by the director of the Martin Gropiusbau, the museum, saying that the piece was removed out of respect for the victims of concentration camps and their descendants. And he said later in an interview that it was about waging the interests of our, meaning the German Jewish citizens, and the exhibition. So he was taking over kind of a role as a considerate power who protects the hurt feelings of even a very small, if vocal, majority. And this is a point where you could see something in action that the sociologist Michael Bodemann called the memory theater. And that's, well, just a second. So how does this memory theater work? The complete title of the book that he wrote already a while ago, 1996, is called The Theater of Memory, the Jewish Community and its German Invention. He wrote this after an analysis of a series of memorial celebrations in Germany and concluded that even as they are only a small part, a very small minority in Germany, in public, because of their historic importance, in public they present a part of an ideological project of the society of the majority. So what he observed is basically that the way they are represented has nothing to do with Jewishness. It's not about being Jewish. But it is only about helping to reconstruct a German identity. So Jewish individuals have nothing to say in this, or little to say in this whole thing. So you might ask me, so, but hang on, you know, like it was the Jewish official who complained in the first place. But actually, he was never asked in this matter. He wrote the letter of complaint, but he never asked for censorship, and he later on stated, I would have opposed any censorship. This does not change my criticism concerning the fact. Chmielewski stepped over a border here, and his work is without respect or pity. So I think this is my idea, is that this way of looking at history casts people in different roles. So we could sum up the roles of this theater play like this. The Jews represent a small and vulnerable minority, and so they need to be protected. And the Germans as full of respect for their minorities, and therefore they take care of the Jewish minority. And in a sense, the Poles, who, you know, it was also a Polish show, they are completely out of the question. They can choose if they'd like to join and protect the Jewish community, or they risk accusations of lacking empathy or even anti-Semitism, what the caring Germans would like to avoid. So it is funny that the idea of anti-Semitism came up. I mean, this came up first, not in reaction to the specific piece, It came up only afterwards when in an interview somebody stated, I think it was the wife of the director, said nobody wanted to be accused of anti-Semitism. And then 2 days later, the first time the question came up in the papers, in a left-wing paper, by the way, the Taz, asking if this work is not actually anti-Semitic. So, what I think, this is especially interesting for today, as the Berlin Biennale has opened, and at the Berlin Biennale, that Artur Chmiejewski, the artist who produced this piece that he is curating, actually has a lot of projects that are based around reenactment and historic questions and provocations, all in an attempt to activate a sense of historic memory and consciousness. So I think yesterday there was the first part of a group of reenactment groups who were actually reenacting the last days of the Battle of Berlin, of the Second World War, and there are other projects here. There will be other projects like the JRIMP, which is a project by Yael Bartana with the idea of repopulating the Jews who left for Israel and bringing them back to Poland. So I think, like the problem with this contemporary way of reenactment is, or the activating of memory, of course, is a tricky business. I mean, it is something that can disturb and inflict pain. But I think, like the idea of memory as something that is not static, that needs to be activated, is also important to also activate critical reflection of your own perspective. But also, I think, to check for mythical narratives. I think also that this is something about like a core value of democracy, like that you keep memory alive and not allow things to turn into a taboo and become holy, sacred, immobile, idolated. So in a sense, one could say that the empty space that's left over in the exhibition by Chmiejewski kind of represents a space of darkness. I mean, the video is gone. There's only a grey wall there, but in a sense, it's a site of an agreement, a site where like a silent agreement. A kind of a manifestation of a negative power of obscuring history, and the agreement is not to address this negative part of history, to not touch the part of history that that can cause pain and that will that can. Yeah, that is difficult to negotiate. I mean, in a sense, it's kind of like turning it's actually one of the core aspects of the relationship. Not the only one, but because it is not there. This kind of this piece that is missing cries louder than everything that is there. I think. In a sense, you could say that aesthetic questions in this context have become questions of morality. Because it is a question about access into like an artwork, into a storage of history, and it is only when this censorship occurred that this became visible. So. In this context of all of this other memorial theater that's been going on, that has tried to, where the artists have tried to shape this theater of memories in their works, I think it will be interesting to see how this develops over the times, and as much criticism as there has been over the Berlin Biennial. That will be at least I will be interested in how this continues. I think when art appears to affirm, like a crime, a wrongdoing, and it invokes protest, that then is obviously wrong, because as a part of the artwork, the public image appears to attack what it accepts in reality. So art actually exposes a moral dilemma of society. So really, it exposes the attempt, the need and the desire to get rid of this troubling image and to put away with it. It's like getting rid of knowing what is wrong, and if getting rid would protect you of that. So I think that's where you come to the basic line where how memory affects your capability to regard change. There's another aspect to this, and again I'm going to quote a German sociologist, Dirk Becker, whose piece I recently stumbled across in the newspaper, where he spoke of political theater. And when he was writing about political theater, it's not the theater of politics that we've come to see a lot when like politicians perform what they perform. No, but it was actually really the idea of a political form of theater. And he pointed out that a political critical theater that criticizes those in power in detail also reaffirms their power in the sense of a critical they also reaffirm their power because in the sense of because they mention their names and they talk of their power in a sense that they project an image of the power that is that the others have. So this projection allows you as a viewer to remain inactive because you have because you see that the power actually resides elsewhere. It's reaffirmed this way. So he asked the question, wouldn't the real joke be to connect the negative idea of a power, that which exploits, oppresses, and so on, with a positive image of power? Wouldn't exactly this provoke the questions what specific people actually do with their resources of power? So this is where I was wondering, like what role art plays in this. And I think, like here I'm maybe taking 2 steps backwards. I was wondering how, how artwork classically comes into this and the role that that monuments play and public monuments play in this relationship. So in this relationship of memorialization to power and manifestations of power. And what you see behind me is an image in a remote place in Denmark. I wanted to bring up the work of a Danish artist who by now may be largely forgotten or only known to Danes because he's also one of the founding fathers of the Danish Academy of Fine Art. His name is Johannes Wiedewelt, and he's an interesting character because apart from many public commissions that he made, he was kind of considered to be the main Danish artist until more or less Bertel Thorvaldsen came along, or the main the main Danish sculptor. And he had a very interesting life because he was considered he was born, I think, like in the 1740s, and he was considered a child prodigy. His father was also a sculptor and sent him to work in Paris, and where he won a silver medal and was immediately sent. When he was sent to Paris at the age of 17, when he was already considered to be a master sculptor in Denmark. In Paris, he won a silver medal at the Academy over there. So he was actually, the Academy was founded to bring up funds to send him on a world tour that brought him to Britain, Germany, and France and Italy. After he came back, he was given quite a number of public commissions. But the thing that I was most interested in is a small landscape park in Jägerspris, about an hour outside of Copenhagen, that you can still visit. And this landscape park was realized between 1776 and 1802, which is the time that Denmark in modern history had more or less its greatest expanse. Denmark, parts of northern Germany, lower Sweden, all of Norway belonged to Denmark. So it was really an empire, and Wiedewelt was given this commission to produce something like a Nordic Valhalla. So the idea to represent the main parts who represent being Danish at that time. What is interesting about this is that all of these monuments that he made are basically abstract. I'm going to explain this a little bit later. The thing is, Wiedewelt went on his grand tour not alone. He traveled a lot of the time with Johannes Winkelmann, who is, of course, kind of like for Germans, he's kind of the inventor of archaeology as an academic discipline, and who basically formulated the idea of neoclassicism. He's the person who made the who explained the sculpture of the ancient Greeks to Germans. So the odd thing about Wiedewelt is that he came home to Denmark and developed completely his own reading. And in Jägerspris, he constructed 54 sculptures in a landscape park, and it's very interesting how these sculptures look and how they represent sort of like this Danish Valhalla, if you like. They're actually spread over a park and a forest. And they're close to a little hunting castle. And the thing is that when I visited it for the first time, like in the early 90s, it was still largely forgotten is the wrong word, but not very many people went there. But it became very interesting to walk through this thing. I mean, it's 54 sculptures, and they're spread out over quite a big site. So. It is a tricky thing to see all of them. He didn't sculpt these works by himself. What is interesting about them, one of the things interesting about them is, of course, that he used elements that stonemasons could do. So he actually made very explicit drawings, and as a sculptor and a stonemason himself, he knew exactly what he was asking for. And as he was very skeptical of what the stonemasons could achieve at that time, he used lots of elements that these stonemasons would usually do, as in architecture or gravestones and things like that. So even though these things look like gravestones and probably take their clue from gravestones, or many of the clues from gravestones. I mean, there are no bodies lying there, so these pieces are there to memorialize ideas, and they do this in quite surprising form. So you have a couple of things that come together, like the choice of materials, and so you have really interesting materials that come together. So this is a detail of this group. It's actually fascinating to go through this park today and actually use an iPhone and Google for whom these pieces were made. So this one is actually for Absalon, the founder of the city of Copenhagen, and here you have these elements of trompe-l'œil, this piece of wood at the bottom with a stone, a sword, and so on. What is really odd about these pieces is how they are placed. So some are placed on the park in the wood, how they are related to the paths that go on there. So this kind of maps an idea of history and of relationship and of course it's a question of inclusion and exclusion that's at play here. This sculpture is from 1777, so it's one of the first ones. It's for Tycho Brahe, the famous Danish astrologist. Yeah, so you actually have his name here on the ball, but it's kind of like it is in fact a ball sitting on a plinth. But of course, you cannot help but see this ball also resembling a planet. So in this sense, this is they're quite figurative, even if they're composed of abstract elements. And what is actually interesting in this terms of placement are things like like this detail. If you see this piece here, I don't want to go into whom these people represent that these pieces are for. Some don't have names, some have names. You can get a map at the entrance, and they will. And it's nice to walk through it with an iPhone or a smartphone, and then check Wikipedia to find out who these people are and how they relate to each other. Just formally, like you have works that already, this is sculpted. I mean, it's not brickwork. It's a trompe-l'œil. It's another trompe-l'œil effect. And another thing is the depth of this work. So unfortunately I'm missing this, I think something in the transferring went wrong, but with this picture, this column that you're seeing here is only executed half. When you see it from the front, it looks like this, it's a full column, and if you see it from the side, it's only half. Yeah, so it's actually, it's a sculpture. It is also like it takes the point of view of the viewer in mind, but it also has, and I think that's quite interesting, it has this idea of an independent viewer, somebody who's able to walk around this piece, and to actually see, it's half, it's not complete. So actually, considering that this is that this is a commission by the king, by royalty, to reaffirm yourself of the greatness of what the Danish nation has produced in a sense of culture. This is quite a strong, potent symbol. So the point that I'm trying to make is that that you have this kind of thing that exists, that is trying to map a landscape, and it exists at a point in time where you have this transition from Baroque to neoclassical, but you have it with a completely original language that didn't that didn't exist anywhere else. And this language also, funnily enough, and that's I think something that also speaks to us today, actually has some kind of sense of being proto-postmodern, in the way that how it assembles these parts that it's made from. So for this reason, I think it's still surprisingly interesting to go through this park and see this and see this park. So I present, because I mean it's a remote place. It's an hour's trip from Copenhagen, so it's not so overcrowded. But I made material on this park available to a group of artists, and I asked artists to suggest monuments based on these ideas that I've formulated here in relation to this. And for a very small exhibition, really like a studio exhibition in a tiny space in Berlin. And I'm just going to quickly show some of the works that I received before I move on to the next point. As I said, the creation of the park coincides with the time that Denmark was at its most powerful, but also at the time, which I think now is a topic of a Hollywood movie, at a time when Denmark was undergoing its period of enlightenment. And I think this is what tempted here Ariel to come up with a piece which is actually situated in a park in Poland, where you could ride a bike and illuminate the park this way, and that's it. You don't move. You don't get forward. Mark Beyer came up with this form, which I think has some resemblance here. But actually what you can see is that what you cannot see here, of course, is unfortunately it has a black frame around it. So this kind of black pyramid is actually, if you see it with a black frame, actually has a lot of connotations to the symbol of the logo of the Deutsche Bank, which is kind of the so it actually gives the pyramid a different reading. The logo of the Deutsche Bank is a square, and it's checked, so you have the arrow in a sense going up. So showing what the Deutsche Bank does with your money is like just increase revenue. Where here, if you would see the direction, it's going up and then it's going down again. There's another project very briefly by a Polish artist, Jarosław Kozakiewicz, who suggested to build a cinema for Ingmar Bergman movies, where he took the symmetry from Ingmar Bergman's face and transformed that into a proper cinema, where you could see Ingmar Bergman movies or the sea. And this is very quickly. This is a piece by Lucheza Boyadiev, which I think it's obvious. I don't really have to explain anything from it. Another piece by Simon Starling, which basically is a floating island. It's I'm going to. I think as time is progressing, I want to go on to the next point. So it would need a little bit of an explanation, but you can ask me later. So this is actually where I wanted to arrive to, which is a piece by Martin Gossner, who's an Austrian artist based in Düsseldorf, who's a professor for sculpture in Düsseldorf. And what interested me in his work is something that he developed, this theory of how he wanted to deal with history. So this is the field of Cannae. The actual, so it actually has a GPS code, so you can actually find it. And he has a series of works that he. Sorry. This is the actual field, and he's trying to. He photographed the way that Hannibal came and Phallus and Varro, the Roman troops, how they were coming now. the piece is called, has the full title, Oriel 6, All Follies Lose When Cotton Rules. The Real Canet at Castelluccio Valmaggiore. So the this site, historically, I mean, it's Canet, of course, is a metaphor for most of us as something like a crushing defeat, and comes from this historic lake of blood produced by shed by Hannibal, who on I think the 2nd of August 216 BC during the Second Punic War lured a very superior Roman army into a trap and completely destroyed it. I mean, basically, like a large part of Roman youth and men were eradicated. This is literally tens of thousands, and so the lake of blood, I think, is not only a metaphor, but it became a kind of Canet. Canet became a national trauma. And it actually is part of a really precarious relationship of site artwork and memorialization, because in here you can obviously apparently still find ancient shards, but well, I'll just skip. We're running late, are we? I'll hurry. So, basically, why Canet is interesting is once again you have a historical trauma, and the interesting story about Canet is, and the story that has been instrumentalized over and over again, is that by modifying their military tactics, the Romans finally succeeded in wiping Carthago out from geography and history forever. And these were the words of Benito Mussolini, who described the Battle of Canet in a speech in 1941. Where he uses it to invoke the indomitable nature of Italians. So what he said was, our capacity to recuperate in moral and material fields is really formidable and constitutes one of the peculiar characteristics of our race. So I think what it does is like this whole thing. It's about turning a crushing defeat into a myth that is there to represent the strength of a nation. So why this is important is let's just for the title that is rather hermetic. All follies lose when cotton rules. Has to do with cotton that has become something like of a signature material for Martin Gossner, who's used it in lots of installations and sculptures. Let me just see if I have another picture here. No, because of its connotations to wounds, leakage, body fluids. But also that you can pack things in cotton, so they don't break. So in effect, the follies that run loose are the follies of national trauma, taboo, sacrum, and identity. But why Oriel? And I think that's like the key question is this Oriel, the bay window, and that has to do with an understanding of history that has shaped you as an individual, or us. Everybody is kind of shaped by the history that he is a part of, and but this having been shaped by it makes it just incredibly difficult to step outside of yourself and look back at it. So what he suggests with this Oriel is actually, he suggests a whole culture of the oriel or the bay window, because the defining qualities of the bay window or the oriel is that it basically extends the living space, the flat, the house, towards the outside, and so it alters the usual rectilinear form, the ground plan, and it adds this bulge, from which you have different viewpoints again. So with this prominent position, it creates not only an expanded view outwards, because if you're inside of this bulge looking out, you can see more than you could see through the window. But you also have a slightly more distant gazed inwards. So from the outside, the bay window doesn't show what's within. So it's more like a swelling, like a bump. But what it does, so it offers this viewpoint without actually breaking down or attempting to break down the whole structure. I think that's probably the whole thing. It remains visible, while the interior of the house remains hidden. So I think that's quite a nice image, this oriel, to look at history and to actually bring together these kind of opposing things that you're likely to place yourself outside of history or inside of it. So I think that's this image. I think is it's basically a good trick. It's like I think like it's trying to find a position where you get closer. I have a quote here from Gostner where he said, "The utopian potential of the oriel consists in the way it allows one almost to walk out into a different world, but without leaving one's own four walls." So I think it makes it possible to operate independently of time. For example, like a different century and a historic situation, but to also reflect on a situation today without resorting to a kind of cheap historization. Just a second. Okay, so I would like to conclude this whole thing with another story, which is related to the title and the idea of timekeeping, which I think is also close to this idea of the oriel window, which is relating to history, which is outside or inside your own four walls. The dilemma of timekeeping is something that I approach from the point of view of a drummer, because as a drummer who plays drums in a band, this is your prime obligation, is that you have to keep time, and time doesn't really mean like time. You have to keep control of time passing, because time passes, and you have to keep the band together because you set the pace. So if you get faster, the band gets faster with you, because you create the intervals in which the music happens. So as a drummer in a band with other musicians, you experience a kind of a tug and pull situation. So you have, like if you're too fast, the guitar player cannot play his solo, and if you're too slow, everybody will eventually leave, I guess. But so you are, in a sense, you are in the middle, and you have all of these forces working at you, but you need all of these forces to work to be able to do what you do. And I think, in a sense, this idea of timekeeping and knowing that when things are going right is something that I'd like to leave you with, and I would like to leave with a piece by my current band, the B-Men, and it's about the passing of time, and the passing of time is called Lick Luck, and it sounds like this. Thank you.